Hello guys, welcome to another blood physiology playlist today. It's your great science tutor Lorenzo. I'll be talking about the erythropoiesis, or we can also say the hematopoiesis. So hematopoiesis, this is about the formation of all blood cells, while erythropoiesis is majorly on the red blood cell. So we want to talk about the development of the red blood cell component. So we'll talk about that of the white blood cell and that of the platelets. But for this video, we'll concentrate on the erythropoiesis. You get it now. So if you are just joining my video, make sure to subscribe and turn on your post notification button so that anytime I drop any video, you'll be sure to be notified. Yeah, so let's jump right into the video. So what is erythropoiesis? Well, before we start, let's talk about hematopoiesis. Then we can now break it down into what we want today. So we'll be talking about hematopoiesis. So what is hematopoiesis? So hematopoiesis or hemopoiesis is the process of origin, development, or maturation of blood cells. That is what hematopoiesis. So what is now erythropoiesis? Erythropoiesis is the same thing: the origin, development, and the maturation of red blood cell. Same thing we have will be leukopoiesis, and we have thrombopoiesis too. Leukopoiesis is for leukocyte, white blood cell. Thrombopoiesis is white blood cell. While thrombopoiesis is platelets. So but we're talking about others when we get to them. So this one will just concentrate on erythropoiesis. So what are the sites of hematopoiesis, or what are the sites? Or generally hematopoiesis. So we have different sites. First of all, you have in fetal life, which is in utero, which is when the baby is in the womb. We have in newborn babies after we have given birth to them. Now we have in children, and we have in adult. These are different stages. So in utero or in fetal life, we have the mesoblastic stage, we have the hepatic stage, and we have the myeloid stage. So I've grouped these three stages into three. Again, we have the mesoblastic stage, we have the hepatic stage, and we have the myeloid stages. You get it now. So in the mesoblastic stage, what do you have? You have the first 2 months. It occurs in the first 2 months. Always in the first 2 months, what do you still have the mesenchyme of the yolk sac. So the red blood cell is produced from there. But at first in the womb, it is uncommitted. You get it now. So it's not that it's producing specific red blood cells, it's just producing blood cells in general. So we are talking about blood cells. So all blood cells are produced from there. You get it now. But RBC also is specific to are produced from the mesenchyme of the yolk sac in the first 2 months. So the next place is the hepatic stage. So after the 3 months down, 3 months to about the 7th month, so in the next 3 months you have the liver start producing red blood cell or blood cells in general. But I said that at first it is uncommitted, it is not producing a specific blood cell in the womb. I said it. So later you have the spleen, and the lymphoid organs are also involved in erythropoiesis or hematopoiesis. So while in the myeloid, so I say the mesoblastic, which is the mesenchyme, we have the liver after the 3rd month, because the mesoblastic, which is the mesenchyme, is about the first 2 months, while starting from the 3rd month to the 7th month or 6th month is the hepatic stage, while the myeloid stage is about the last 3 months before the delivery. And here the bone marrow and the liver takes up with your myeloid bone marrow, don't forget. So now when they give birth to the baby, now until the baby reaches 20 years, are you getting now? It is the long bones that form blood cells, usually red blood cells. The long bones, which is the spongy bones part, which is the bone marrow itself, is the one that forms blood cells, specifically the red blood cell. Because I'm talking about blood cells in general, and I'm also specifying the red blood cell. So when you give birth to the baby, from the 0 months down to the 20th year, all long bones produce bone. So long and also flat bones. You get it now? But after the child crosses 20 years, based on what different literature can mean different things, but after 20 years, what happens? Membranous bones like the vertebrate, the sternum, the rib, the scapula, the iliac bone, the skull bone, and some long bones that have not fibrosis already, they start forming red blood cells or blood cells in general. Why? Because after 20 years, most of those long bones will start having fat deposit and lose its erythropoietic function. So the long bones will start to lose their erythropoietic function. They will not be able to form blood cells or red blood cells in general. So all blood cells they will not produce, and also red blood cells in general. Are you getting me? But in adult life now, in adult life, because we are saying long bones now, it is just membranous bones. But when you start getting adult, maybe after about 30 40 years, what happens now? The liver and the spleen now take up the function to produce blood cells. Why? Because the bone marrow becomes dangerous or destroyed or fibrous. Again, so the liver and the spleen will produce the same amount the bone marrow will also produce. So you are also nice. You're supported. There's no problem. Okay now. So now, but one thing you have to know, that leukocytes are produced less in number than what? Red blood cell. So leukocyte and white blood cell have a smaller number in production than red blood cell, but the production are usually more. Like now they are producing in about 500:1. You get it? So they produce more leukocyte and platelet more than red blood cell normally, but because they have short lifespan, because their lifespan only ends about 10 to 11 days, but red blood cell stays till about 120 days. You get it now? So that's why the production over time of red blood cell gets more, reaching up so many million, but that of white blood cell are short, but because they are produced more in higher ratio, about 500:1, because they die faster. You get it now? So there is much more production of leukocyte and thrombocyte than RBC, but the normal count of RBC is more than both of them. So hope you understand. It's just simple logic. So since we have talked about this one, now what is the process or the production of erythropoiesis? What is the process of the production? So now we have what we call erythropoietic stem cell. Are you getting now? Or we can call it hematopoietic stem cell. Hematopoietic stem cell are bone marrow. They are bone marrow that produce what we call uncommitted pluripotent red blood cell. So they are producing uncommitted cell, which means the cells that they are producing at first are not committed to anything. So they are not producing cells that can produce anything for now. You get it now? So they are just producing different types of blood cells in utero, because with time they start to specify on the blood cells they want to form after after birth is being given. So like I said, immediately the production starts, because all I'm just explaining now is how it is being produced. So at first they are producing uncommitted pluripotent blood cell. Why? And as they are producing, again, if I'm to describe uncommitted pluripotent hematopoietic cell, they are cells that give rise to all types of blood cells, which I've explained, which are produced in beginning. But with time, after the child has been given birth to, they start forming what we call committed pluripotent hematopoietic stem cells. Stem cells are self-renewal. They start forming themselves, so they can produce over and over again. So always know that there's what we call uncommitted at first. So I'm showing you a diagram now. So they are uncommitted. You get it? Now, uncommitted pluripotent hematopoietic stem cells. Stem cells renew, they form blood cells over and over a time, and I'll give you the site they are produced. But at first, in utero, they are uncommitted. So after the child is given birth to, they become committed. And when they become committed, they form two things. They form the lymphoid stem cells, and the colony forming unit of blastocyte. So the lymphoid stem cells and the colony forming unit of what? Blastocyte. So the lymphoid stem cell produce what? Lymphocyte and natural killer cells. So the lymphocyte and natural killer cells are white blood cells. Are you getting me now? So they help in what? Cell-mediated immunity, so immunity process, by producing T cells and B cells. Now in the colony forming unit of blastocyte, they give rise to what we call the myeloid cells. Yeah, so the myeloid cells are cells that are formed in the bone marrow. So they give birth to myeloid cells, and when they give birth to myeloid cells, what happens now? They now forms various colonies. So the first cells that it formed, because all these things are majorly from white blood cells, so lymphocyte or lymphoid stem cells and colony forming units of blastocyte. Then colony forming unit of blastocyte forms myeloid cells. In the same process, they also form cells that are in colonies too. And the cells that are in colonies are what? Colony forming unit of erythrocyte that give birth to what? Red blood cells, which is erythrocyte. There are colonies that are forming erythrocyte. You have colony forming units of what? Granulocyte that give birth to what? Basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. Colony forming unit of granulocyte, because they form granules that are stainable. We'll talk about it in the white blood cell. So the first one is colony forming unit of erythrocyte. The next one is colony forming unit of granulocyte. The last one is colony forming unit of megakaryocyte. The megakaryocyte forms a platelet. So recapping again, you should understand that the first one, you have the uncommitted in utero that produce different type of blood cells, but when the child is giving birth to, what happens, it now becomes committed in the bone marrow to form what? Lymphoid stem cells and colony forming unit of blastocyte. So the colony forming unit of blastocyte form myeloid cells, and when it forms myeloid cells, what happens, it now forms alongside colonies too. The colonies are colony forming unit of erythrocyte that form the red blood cell, colony forming unit of granulocyte that form Ben, basophils, eosinophils, neutrophils, alongside also produce what? Monocyte also. And the last one is colony forming unit of megakaryocyte that give birth to what? Platelets. So I've explained it already. So moving on to, let us look at the stages, because there are stages of red blood cell formation or stages of erythrocyte. The stages of erythrocyte are divided into what? 6. You get it now? They are divided into 6, and they change during, as they are producing, they change. And I'll give you how to know how they change, because it's how they change from different points that makes it easier for you to know them. So, and the 6 of them, the 6 stages are what? After you form the colony unit of erythrocyte, are you getting me now? Before you form your matured RBC, you must pass through these stages. The first one we'll be talking about, so you are seeing it on your screen now. The first one we'll be talking about is what? Proerythroblast, or you call it a Normoblast. It's still the same thing. So first of all, you have the committed pluripotent cell. When you form the committed pluripotent cell, you form the colonies. So if you form the colonies, you first form the next one you'll be doing is the stages. And the stages, you have the Normoblast. In the Normoblast, after the Normoblast, you have what we call the early Normoblast. You get it now? So the early Normoblast, or can call the early Normoblast the basophilic Normoblast. Are you getting now? Because why they call it the basophilic Normoblast? Because there are so many things that occurs there, which I'll be telling you. So after the early Normoblast, you have the intermediate Normoblast. So you can also call the intermediate Normoblast polychromatophilic Normoblast. Polychromatophilic Normoblast, or you call it the early Normoblast. So after that one, now you have the next one, you have the late Normoblast, or you can call the late Normoblast autochromatic Normoblast. Autochromatic Normoblast, because now hemoglobin is present and it's not staining with red. So it contains eosinophils. I get it now? So which we'll be talking about. It's not like it contains eosinophils. The cytoplasm are more eosinophilic there. So we'll also talk about it. Now you also have the reticulocyte, which is immature red blood cell, and the last one, you now have the matured red blood cell. So now again, we have the proerythroblast, we have the early Normoblast, you have the intermediate Normoblast, you have the late Normoblast, and after you have the late Normoblast, you have the reticulocyte and you have the red blood cells. So I'll be giving you in chunks, so it will be very, very easy for you to know. You get it now? So now what happens now in the proerythroblast, or you can call it Normoblast? What happens there? Are you getting now? The diameter of the nucleus is about 20 micrometer. You get it now? The diameter of the nucleus is so large, about 20 micrometer. And remember, red blood cell, the size of red blood cell is very small. I get it. But this one, the size of the red blood cell at this particular point is 20 micrometer. Yeah, it's so large, almost completely the whole cell itself. Now the nucleus has 2 or more nuclei and a reticular network. So the nucleus is still present, and you know in red blood cell there is no nucleus. I get it, it's non-nucleated. So but this one, there is a nucleus and there is presence of 2 or more nuclei and the reticular network. I get it now? So there is no presence of hemoglobin here. So there is absence of hemoglobin. Get it now? So now, since and the hemoglobin here, which you are seeing, is about 1% of the protein of hemoglobin, and it is stained by basophils. So they are basophilic in nature. Are you getting me now? They are basophilic in nature. And after this stage now, what happens? The cells start preparing for the next one, which is early Normoblast, or I can call it basophilic Normoblast. Now in the basophilic or early Normoblast, what happens? Why do I call them basophilic Normoblast? One, remember the size of the red blood cell at the Normoblast, or we can call it the Proerythroblast. So like I said, Normoblast or Proerythroblast. So at this particular point, it has shrunk. The cell has shrunk to about 15 micrometer. Before it was 20 micrometer, now it is what, 15 micrometer. Now the nuclei here have disappeared. The nuclei in the nucleus is disappeared. Remember, you have inside the nucleus, you have the nucleolus and you have the chromatin thread. The nucleolus and the chromatin thread. So now here the cell, the whole red blood cell, which is 20 micrometer, has shrunk to about 15 micrometer, and the nuclei have disappeared already, and there's now condensation of the chromatin network. So the chromatin thread is now condensing. Are you getting now? It is still basophilic in nature. Yeah, now so the cell is still basophilic in nature, which means it contains a lot of organelles there. So it's still basophilic in nature now. So after it's basophilic in nature, that is, we'll keep it at that. Then we are preparing from the intermediate normoblast. So the only difference here, from 20 it is now 15 micrometer, and now before, the nuclei, the chromatin thread and the nucleus is still intact with hemoglobin. So here also they are also still intact, but the only difference here is that it has shrunk from 20 micrometer to 15 micrometer, and here the nuclei is what has disappeared. So now we prepare for the next one, which is the intermediate normoblast, or the chromatophilic normoblast. Yeah, or you call it intermediate normoblast. So why is this intermediate normoblast very important? This now, it moves now here. There's now shrinking now. The cell that is 15 micrometer before has shrunk to about 10 to 12 micrometer. It has shrunk to about 10 to 12 micrometer. So follow the trend. It has shrunk to about 10 to 12 micrometer. The nucleus is still present, because the first one that went was the nuclei. So the nucleus is still present. Now here hemoglobin start to appear. There's hemoglobin production here. Are you getting now? So the cytoplasm is already basophilic. Are you getting now? And since there's a presence of hemoglobin, now can also be stained with acidic stain. So it will now be made up of an acid, which is acidophilic, and a basophilic staining. And when you have the both of these two people, you call it what? Polychromatic erythroblast. Are you getting now? You call it polychromatic erythroblast. So that's why I gave it the name, polychromatophilic normoblast. That is the name. You can call it polychromatophilic normoblast, or you can call it intermediate normoblast. So remember, here the nucleus is still there, the chromatin thread continues to condense, and it has shrunk from 15 to about 10 to 12 micrometer. And now there's a presence of acid and base stain. The acid came because of the presence of hemoglobin. Now the next one is the late normoblast. The late normoblast, or we call it what? The autochromatic normoblast. The autochromatic, auto means that there's no acidic stain, the base stain have gone, there's no basophilic nature again. Why? Because the organelles are disappearing already. So the organelles are disappearing, so it's not present there. So hemoglobin has increased already. So there's high increase of hemoglobin at this point, and there's high increase of hemoglobin. What happens? It will now be stained with acid. Are you getting now? And if it's stained with acid, it becomes what? If we continue to stain with acid with absence of organelles, it will be called what? Autochromic erythroblast. Autochromic erythroblast. Now since we have autochromic erythroblast, now listen, it's shrinking. It's shrinking already from 20 to 15, from 15 to 10 or 12, and for 10 or 12 to about less than 10, about 8 to 10 micrometer here in the late normoblast, or we call it autochromatophilic normoblast. So it has shrunk already. Are you getting now? So the chromatin thread now, I said it was shrinking. So now the chromatin thread it has shrunk too much that it's now like an ink spot nucleus. So note it for your exam. It's now like an ink spot nucleus. So since we have gotten it now, very, very exciting. So the next thing we have to know now that the nucleus now begin to degenerate and disappear. So at this particular point, the nucleus is out because the last component, which is the chromatin thread, has shrunk to an ink spot. So the disappearing of the nucleus is called pycnosis. Pycnosis, don't forget. Now, the late normoblast, or the autochromatophilic normoblast, becomes the reticulocyte. The reticulocyte, or we call it immatured red blood cell. In the reticulocyte now, there is no nucleus present. Are you getting now? There is no nucleus present at all. And since there is no nucleus, there is presence of what we call retinacular network. The cytoplasm contains retinacular network, and they are present in like retinaculum. You get it now? So they continue to degenerate. The organelles around continue to degenerate. They are not present again. So in newborn babies, the reticulocytes are about 2 to 6% of RBCs. So they are about 2 to, that is the reticulocyte, but they or later degenerate, because this is where we turn from reticulocyte to mature red blood cell. So with time, the number of the reticular network decreases during the first week of birth. So as you approach the gestation, last week of gestational phase, the reticulocytes start to decrease. Later, the reticulocyte become 1%, because I said before the baby is born it's about 2 to 6%, but before birth is done it's about 1%. You get it now? So in this process now, we want to become a mature red blood cell. So the reticulocyte is basophilic during the process. Are you getting me now? Because there's the remain of the Golgi body, mitochondria, and other organelles. So the last one now is the matured red blood cell. The matured red blood cell now, it has shrunk from 8 micrometer to about 7.2 micrometer, and the shape is now biconcave. It can be a globular shape or it can be a biconcave shape. So now the matured red blood cell has a lot of hemoglobin, because in this same hemoglobin, that's what red blood cell will pair to in order for it to offload oxygen to the tissues. You get it now? So but there's no nucleus. That's why the red blood cell is not nucleated, because we'll be doing the red blood cell on its own. So now one thing you have to take, that to form a reticulocyte it takes 5 days, and to form a mature red blood cell it takes 2 days. So total to form a mature red blood cell is 7 days, and total to form an immature red blood cell is 5 days. You get it now? So one pro tip I'll give you, which is important events that occurs, the proerythroblast. What happens in the proerythroblast? They're shrinking, and here hemoglobin start to form, but it's not there. Hemoglobin have not appeared yet, so that's why it is called the basophilic pro-normoblast or proerythroblast. So it is still basophilic. There's no hemoglobin there. Early normoblast, the nucleoli disappears. That is one key event about that one, and it shrink to 15 micrometer. In the intermediate normoblast, hemoglobin has come, so it's now mixed, polychromatic. Now in the late normoblast, what happened? Nucleus have disappeared, because it's like an ink spot. So in the reticulocyte, there are reticulum there, and the capillaries are forming what we call, to allow diapedensis to occur. And the last one, there's formation of matured red blood cell. I hope it all makes sense to you. You have understood everything I've talked about on the erythropoiesis. Yeah. So in my next video, I'll be talking about factors that are necessary for the formation of what erythropoiesis. I don't want to bombard this video, so I want to split it into another one, which is the factors necessary for erythropoiesis to occur. Yeah. So stay with me to the last video. It will be very, very interesting you to stay, because you'll be learning a lot. So this should help you. This short summary should help you navigate your blood physiology, because I talked about the beginning, and here is yours, and talking about how it is formed in utero. So just follow me. Yeah. So if you have not subscribed to my video, like, share to all medical students. I'll be seeing you in my next video. Bye bye.